An anticipated property tax reform package was introduced in the Indiana Senate this week. The measure is projected to provide more than $1.4 billion in property tax relief over the next 3 years, along with targeted cuts for Hoosiers over 65, disabled veterans, farmers, and first-time homebuyers. Two other Senate priority bills also moved forward, with one to require permits for large, long-distance water pipeline projects, and another to improve fiscal oversight of government contracts with legislative intent. The week also saw progress with Senate bills on natural resources, environmental affairs, groundwater emergencies, rural broadband, and film and media production tax credits. And all this while a February 17 deadline approaches for bills to advance from committees. And our guests are going to take us through it all, this busy week that was, on tonight's Primetime. And good evening, I'm Bruce Haines. With us today, our 13th District Republican State Senator and Assistant President Pro Tem Sue Glick, and 17th District Republican State Senator Andy Zay. And we're glad you're here too. You can join the conversation as well. Just call in your comments and questions to the number that you see on the screen as we welcome once again Senator Sue Glick, Senator Andy Zay.
Great to be with you.
Thank you for being here. Appreciate that.
Thank you for having us.
So with property tax reform as the Senate Republicans' top priority this year, what are some first thoughts you might have? The relief package came out of the Tax and Fiscal Policy Committee this week. What did you see? Sue?
Well, generally it's a reflection on what Governor Braun ran on when he was running for governor. He is approaching it much as he said he would as a businessman. We're going to look at it as a, cut everywhere and build back to what we need. He promised that it would be severe, it would be immediate, and that the taxpayer would get relief. What that amounts to with tax dollars or local tax dollars, property taxes stay local. And so those cuts immediately affect your local government. Counties, the townships, the cities, and they're feeling, in the schools especially. So there was a lot of angst, if you will, amongst people who receive those local tax dollars. And so the modified version, what's coming out of the Senate, is going to be much different than the original ask by the governor. But again, remember, it has to go through the second house, so it has to go back to the House of Representatives to see what they do with it, and there'll be conference committees.
Eddie, how about you, sir?
Well, I mean, the tough thing about this is, unfortunately, we're going to be seeing some reality in our property tax bills in here in a few months. And what we are doing now will no way touch that. So we're actually projecting here a year off as to where these savings will be and the opportunity for savings. And I will say the other tough part from our seat and our vantage point as legislators and responsible for funding our state government for 2 years, which we're working on towards as we move towards April, is it's a different year. It's a tighter budget. The revenue forecasts are tight. We are close to hitting our estimates, but under where we are from last year. So to enact tax cuts at a time like this is going to be a tremendous challenge. It will take cuts in other areas. It'll take cuts in local government and spending and reviewing that. And there's an opportunity for locals to potentially raise some more income taxes. With wheel taxes, Lowit taxes, public safety taxes, and those kinds of things. But then that will kind of offset the savings of what can be done potentially with the property tax. So, it's a matter of the collaboration working together from top to bottom, from the state down to the local level. It's making sure that, that they still have the resources they need, because schools do not have the opportunity to have a backfill of any sort of income taxes. Cities and counties and some of the other entities at the local level do. So, we're midway through. We've put together kind of our first blush at this, and we'll see what the House does to it and where we end up in April with all three groups coming together, the House, Senate, and the governor's office.
Yeah. Procedurally, the relief package appears to include language from Senate Bills 8 and 9. Senate Bill 8 on referendums and Senate Bill 9 on freezing the maximum levy growth quotient for next year, then capping it over the next couple of years. Is it assumed that when that kind of thing happens, that SB 8 and 9, if you will, in this case, just kind of meld into one, and so it is one larger piece of legislation moving forward and
Absolutely.
under that name?
It has to go together because that's the only way you can do planning at that level.
Okay.
You know, piecemealing it would only confuse all but about a few people in the state government who can understand finance. And it must be open so that we get, logical and rational arguments from the other areas, such as the locals and the people who are most affected by it. They have to be able to understand what this means. For the average person, when you talk about maximum growth levies and those types of things, you're way over their head. What they're looking at is that tax statement they get in the latter part of April and know they have to pay by May the 10th, and they're going to have to pay the other half in November. And they want to see something happen that's immediate, or they want to know it's going to happen over time, but to give them some relief. Probably the biggest thing in any person's life, after marriage and children, is owning their own home. And so when you look at a property tax statement that almost puts you out of the market or blocks any type of advancement, it is crucial to them when they can, look at that. There's some part of the bill right now that calls for deferral, and you can defer up to $500 per year, up to a maximum of $10,000 as the bill's written right now, for those individuals who are struggling to just meet those tax bills as they come. But they have to know that gets paid back when the house is sold down the road. So it's a little bit of relief, but it's not a complete response to, and there just has to be more than one avenue and more than one level of reaction to the property tax situation.
It was certainly a lot to introduce going into the end of this particular week, because from here you look forward and you see an approaching session break beginning February 21, but that's preceded by the need to get any bill out of a committee by Monday and getting that bill out of the chamber by Thursday. So let me ask you both, Andy, I'll start with you. How are the pace of things of going around these days?
On the committee side, I think we're pretty well wrapped up. There may be a few committees early in the week, but I think, I'm not positive, but about everything's on the floor now, either on the second or will be soon. There may be one or two committees on Monday. But it's a full calendar. I think we had 45 bills on the second, if I'm not mistaken, on Thursday, and it was a little lighter on third. So we'll expect to see that calendar fill up by middle of the week, and most of the work this week will be on the session floor, looking at amended bills and potentially amending a few more to get out of the Senate what we can get out. And that's the process, to get our job done and get it done by February 21st, and then await the House bills and work towards April.
Yeah, I was always given this little caveat in all of that kind of line of thinking, because even dead bill language can reemerge before the session ends in April. Sue, what's going on?
Well, what that means is that if language has passed out of committee or it's still alive, if it's passed one house, even though it died on the floor of one house, it can come back on the other house as an amendment. If there's a bill that's very similar in nature, same article, same title, whatever in the code. But we look at it, why did it die in the first place? What language are we seeing? And does it fit in the legislation or the bill that we have on our side? Yeah, it's still active. If it hasn't outright been defeated completely, it's still bouncing along, and it can be resurrected. But the same issues are going to come up in the other house, absolutely, and it may be dead twice. So it just depends.
Wow. Something that has stayed alive in a slightly different manner of speaking, and Andy, I was thinking about your bill, Senate Bill 43, requiring the Indiana Gaming Commission to do an independent study about identifying the top 3 regions in the state to which someone holding an owner's license for a riverboat could relocate that licensed owner's gaming operations. In the spirit of that, and looking from earlier this year with efforts to bring something from Rising Sun to New Haven and no vote taken, where are all of those factors currently for you?
Well, not for me, for us. I mean, it's kind of a leadership call that to help create that vehicle bill to keep that conversation alive. And, that's a matter of how the legislation was created when we first dipped our toe into riverboat gambling 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And that's simply that any license that moved needs to come through our body and be approved. And the heavy lifting on that, as I said publicly, as we walked through that process last fall into this spring or into this winter, was done by the mayor and his due diligence with his council, and then also getting around the state and visiting the other gaming operations. The casino in question was in. They bid on the casino that moved to Vigo County a few years ago. They did not win that bid. By data speaking, they are the lowest performing casino in the state. So there's a pretty strong agreement and understanding out there that we need to look at their performance and where we can potentially help them out and give them some guidance, possibly in location and where it might work for not only them but for us as a state. And that's certainly where this study is gravitated to, where there will be an independent study. It won't be one of our traditional like public policy study committees or anything internal. That'll be taken care of by the Gaming Commission outside, and they'll make recommendations back to the State Budget Committee. I think it's October now with the amendment.
Okay.
So,
Good to know.
And the one thing about gaming is it's very site specific. Many communities around the state have embraced gaming. They welcome that it's something that they can work with. In other areas, culturally, it just isn't a good fit. And sometimes we see that only after they start an in-depth study of a siting which is offered. And then some people say, yeah, bring it on, we're fine with it, or they're totally indifferent. In other areas, they simply have indicated that they just don't wish to have it located in their area, near their communities, and it's just not a culturally good fit for them. So it's what we want to know. We'd like to know it as early as possible in the scheme of things, so that they don't expend a lot of money doing those sites and doing the back studies that have to be done when you're locating a gambling casino in an area. But you have to take into the factor, where are the others located, what's their and now, when the original licenses were granted, Indiana was, if not one of the first, very early on in the gaming concept, whereas now our sister states around us all have gaming. Michigan has the traditional tribal gaming, as well as the state of Ohio, the state of Illinois, both have casinos. So it makes a difference on how these casinos will perform based on where the traffic is, what how many people are coming and going to the casinos and how much use they get.
Yeah. We are speaking this evening with Senators Sue Glick and Andy Zay, and for our members of the Senate, here's a House question that has been called in by Rod. Rod would like to know about HB 1322 and wonders if this particular bill will pass, which allows state retirement funds to be invested in Bitcoin EFTs.
I don't know how to answer that. I think Bitcoin is new, obviously, I think as an investment tool. And I would say when you're talking about state retirement funds, we're still struggling a little bit to fund some pension liabilities and bring some of that forward. Typically, the investments used in that area are very conservative funds. And I don't think they would venture out into Bitcoin EFTs as a part of that portfolio. Which doesn't mean never, but right now I'm just speculating. I don't know much about that bill. I don't even know the traction. I don't know if it's passed out of a committee or if they've really considered it, but that would be my suspicion. I don't know if you have any comments on that, Senator, if you have that same thinking.
The law says prudent man rule. What would a prudent man invest his own funds in? And in this case, you're much more conservative about it because you're investing public funds.
Yeah.
And so other people's money makes a big difference when you're a state officer whose sole job is to invest the money and bring returns back to the state.
Mm-hmm. Right. We're going to go to the phones again with another offline question. With the shortfall, this one from Shane, with the shortfall on property taxes, schools will be affected. Has the Senate considered a graduated tax on income?
Well, there's currently a graduated, they are indexing, and I think it is Senator Holman's bill, that would only allow a 0.5% change in the income tax in those years where there is an income increase over a certain percent. I think the growth has to be 0.3% or better, if I'm not mistaken. And so it makes it graduated, but only in terms of what this was doing was it was put in the bill form to anticipate lowering the income tax rate. Income taxes traditionally haven't been what we've used on schools. Schools come out of property taxes generally, but I think it's on the table because I think right now everything's on the table. The state and local revenue, the SALTER, state and local revenue taxes were all being studied, have been studied over the last couple of years. And I think that's an ongoing study because we know that right now there's too much pressure on the property tax end of things. Maybe it's not prudent right now to go any further with reducing income tax, but we need to look at whether other taxes are available or if we need to hold the line on spending in all areas, which is what Governor Braun has indicated he would like to do, is review all spending. And by approaching it in a universal mode, it may not be as onerous as was originally thought, where you got rid of all income tax and shifted around in that regard. So we're looking at all of it.
Yeah, I think the Holdman legislation was a commitment to continue to look at decreasing that income tax. And I think to the caller's question, I think the amendment that was put forward on SB 1 was part of the concern that there are not any income taxes that would backfill a reduction in some of the property tax credits. So I think a lot of that's been taken care of in the amendment that was presented on Senate Bill 1 that came to the floor.
Mm-hmm. It has been a busy time for each of you, and when you go to each legislator's site online, you can follow different bills and the states thereof. You, Sue, are an author and co-author on 2 of the top 5 Senate priority bills this session.
She's kind of a big deal.
One of the... Well, and it's good that you're here, because one thing that I'd like to have you help us understand is the water management and permitting concepts in and around Senate Bill 4, looking for permitting and the sharing of resources from basin to basin water transfers, large long-distance water projects. What is Senate Bill 4?
Well, what it does basically, if you look at it in the whole, is it was brought about by the LEAP district when the original siting was for Eli Lilly to build a major campus up in Boone County, along with a number of other large businesses and economic development, all that were water intensive. And they realized after they'd sited it and began the acquisition of land in that area that the aquifer wouldn't generally sustain it. There wasn't enough water in that aquifer without bringing it in from somewhere. And so water studies have been done. One of the proposals was to bring it in from the Tippecanoe River or the Wabash. Okay, when you get to the Wabash, you're talking about 100 miles from a different basin, from a different aquifer. Those kinds of things cross many counties. They would affect livestock operations. They would affect other businesses or water intensive. Significant water users are considered to be anyone who draws 100,000 gallons a day out of a single well. Mm-hmm. And so what that bill would be is that under the IURC, the Indiana Utility Regulatory Committee, that they would, or commission, they would have some authority to grant permits to allow that withdrawal, but only after public hearing, only after a study has been done about what effect it would have to make those large withdrawals, how it would affect other significant users and residential areas. You have to remember, some of these areas are areas of tremendous residential property growth and residential growth, and that affects everyone in those areas as well. So we're just trying to get a level playing field, make sure that if there's significant water withdrawals, that there's permits issued so that everybody knows ahead of time what impact there could be. And then there's a second bill that we also had was Senate Bill 28, which would call for if there was if you had a water well and you were a significant water user and suddenly your water pressure dropped or your ability to use that water was seriously impaired, you would notify the Department of Natural Resources, which has the authority over wells, and they would immediately have to investigate why there was, what impacted your water use, and make sure that that water was replaced either by someone over here who's withdrawing too much, which is affecting your water. And that's especially important to residential uses and livestock. If you're a person with 1,000 head of livestock, or even 200 or 300 head of livestock, if you don't have water, you can't operate it very long. And also the large water users in terms of irrigation. All we want to do is make sure we protect our natural resources and share them in a responsible manner. And that's what these bills are designed to do.
No easy segue, but when you want to talk about film and production credits relative to water management, but you have a couple of bills I'd love you to speak of. One is that Senate Bill 306 on its way to the House,
right.
And then your work with rural broadband. So take them in any order.
Well, what better place to talk about film and production credit than here in the studio with you tonight, Bruce? But in reality, Indiana has a proud history of some very iconic movies. Whether it's Breaking Away at Indiana University many moons ago, Rudy up on the Notre Dame campus. Hoosiers in the infamous Smiling Jim. And right now in today's tax climate and culture in the movie production arena, it wouldn't be feasible to make those movies here. And so we've seen an explosion out of California, looking where a lot of these movie producers and content creators are looking for new homes. We know a lot of people know what's happened in Atlanta with Tyler Perry's investment in the Marvel Studios and those down there. And we're certainly not going to jump to that level, but we're at a point where we have an opportunity here to create a culture and a climate where we can take charge of some of this content creation. We have some great folks doing here. Huntington University has a world-class production studio with Lance Clark and their digital media arts program down there, where they're training students that are all going away to these other areas, and he would love to keep them here. And so this is a beginning step of being able to transfer those tax credits and allow private industry to help in funding some of the content creation right here in Indiana. So this is a simple step that we hopefully can build on within IEDC to get some investment in that kind of thing. And on the pivot to broadband, which is just our outreach. We really want to blanket our state with high-speed broadband. I've been working on that for a number of years. The state itself has invested $350 million in that outreach over the last 2 budget cycles. We're on the precipice right now in the next few months of getting $868 million in federal funds that will build on a capital investment of about $5 billion. And with that, the intent is to have high-speed broadband in every home in our state. And what my bill does is it tries to bring the parties together as far as the utilities and the poles and getting the broadband attachments there, and that we can get them to play together well in the sandbox as we roll this out over 4 years. I mean, because what we've done now in the state investment was over 5 years. So we're looking at doing 3 times that here in about the same window. And we've got to make sure there are as few problems and speed bumps rolling that out as possible to get the impact that we want and need with this service to support education, support health, and certainly support our economic development throughout the state of Indiana and the rural areas that we both represent. So it'll be a critical infrastructure on the way.
We're in the lightning round portion with less than about 30 seconds apiece for the unfair question of what other legislation that you've written or are noticing from your colleagues that you're following during the weeks of the session, after halftime in particular.
Well, we're just now getting the bills from the House of Representatives that they have passed through, the entire House. They've passed now, and they have named us as the Senate sponsor, the Senate author. So we're each getting, some of us are getting bills that are mirror ones that we have passed. There's some carbon sequestrations bills that I had over in the Senate, and some that have kind of stumbled a little bit in the House of Representatives. We're going to take a look at those in our committees. There's some bills that, if they mirror our bills entirely, we can merge those bills or dispense with one or the other of them. But we'd like to move these towards the finish line as quickly as we can, and review those as they come in, because some of them we haven't even seen before. So.
Wow. I think she spoke for you.
I think she did. we got a lot of health care rolling around too. We're trying to save some money there. So
There are a lot of wheels, and they are all moving, and we thank you for keeping that machinery intact in Indianapolis. We have been speaking this evening with Indiana State Senator Sue Glick, Indiana State Senator Andy Say. Lady, gentlemen, thank you again.
Thank you, Bruce.
You as well for joining us. For everyone with Primetime, I'm Bruce Haines. Thank you for watching. Take care. We'll see you next week. Good night. The preceding program on PBS Fort Wayne was made possible in part by
The Rogers Company has been conducting business in Northeast Indiana since 1944 as Rogers Markets, and now as the Rogers Company, with commercial property and real estate development. Pleased to support local not-for-profits and PBS Fort Wayne. The Regional Chamber of Northeast Indiana advocates for world-class infrastructure, a competitive business climate, 21st century talent, and rural investment. One region, one voice. NEINadvocates.com. Purdue University Fort Wayne will host Marcus Collins, cultural scholar and professor, Thursday, February 27th at 7:30 as part of the Omnibus Speaker Series, inspiring fresh and diverse thoughts. Details at pfw.edu/omnibus.